This is your captain speaking. We will be landing in about 2.5 seconds. Just kidding, guys. What I did want to come to you today and talk about is air to fuel, AFR, and just a little bit about how it works and why it works as it does. This is probably a topic that a lot of you probably already know, but some don't and some may not. I get a lot of questions. Is it normal for my AFR gauge to fluctuate like that? If it bounces around, is that normal right there? And really what it is, guys, is under transient fueling, getting into the throttle, getting out of the throttle, going into neutral or deceleration. It is normal for the AFR gauge to fluctuate quite a bit like that, because basically what it's doing is it's using your upstream O2 sensors to essentially sense the amount of air and fuel coming through the exhaust pipes, and they're crossing that sensor and we're getting a reading. It's constantly crossing the sensor, sending a signal to your injector pulse width to send the right amount of fuel in, going back through the sensor, back to the injectors, and they call that a loop. Essentially, it's basically closed loop fueling. And when you're in closed loop fueling, that's essentially when the O2 sensors or the oxygen sensors are sensing your air to fuel, and they're making fuel trim adjustments. Whether they're leaning it out a little bit or richening it up, just depends on what it's getting for a reading of AFR. And it's always wanted to try to keep that AFR at stoichiometric, which is on newer cars 14.1 parts of air and fuel. And on some of the older cars, you're probably thinking, well, wait a minute, 14.1, I thought it was supposed to be 14.7. Well, a normal gasoline air to fuel is 14.7. A lot of the newer fuels now, though, have a little bit of ethanol in them, usually about 10% ethanol. So your new stoichiometric is really 14.1. So that's why you're going to see this fluctuate right here on a good tune, very dialed in. And basically, those fuel trims are just adjusting for that proper stoichiometric air to fuel ratio 14:1. So you're going to see that fluctuate a little bit, though, and you don't want to panic necessarily when you see it drop all the way to, get a decel acceleration here. You can see it drop all the way to 20. That's not lean. The reason why it's doing that is it thinks it's lean because the wideband sensors, the O2 sensors, aren't sensing any fuel because we're going into a thing called decel fuel cutoff. And essentially when you let off the gas and you're still in gear, the car knows it doesn't need any more fuel, so it cuts fuel. So essentially you're getting a 20 AFR reading of extremely lean when it's really not. It just doesn't have any fuel going through. So that's due to decel fuel cutoff. But that's essentially it, guys. It's in a closed loop setup is really when it's reading those sensors and making fuel trim adjustments. One time when you're going to go into open loop, which is really when, actually more so when your car's going into fuel enrichment, once you go under wide open throttle and you put that pedal all the way to the floor, it's going to jump out of the closed loop fueling and it's going to go straight to fuel enrichment, which is really what your tuner is going to set in a commanded table. Typically, depending if it's boosted application or if it's just a naturally aspirated application, your AFR, commanded AFR is really going to be somewhere between 11, probably 11.1, and possibly even into the low 12s if it's naturally aspirated. But that's essentially it, guys. You've got closed loop fueling, you've got fuel enrichment, and you've got open loop fueling as well. And that's essentially just when you're in normal open loop. That's when you're in your cold start tables. Just got to shift here. That's essentially when you're in your cold start. It's going to jump over to a cold start fuel table and just really warm things up. Then the O2s are going to warm up and they're going to kick into closed loop and you're going to be on your way. But that's essentially it, guys. If you have any questions or any thoughts, leave them in the comments below.